The day a crazy man took my baby. This happened last winter, December of 2011. They say the scariest of scary stories are those that involve real people, not the paranormal. After this, I have to say I agree. Here's my recollection of the most terrifying experiences of my life. My husband was sleeping his way back to good health in the hospital after a nasty infection. The man never went to the doctor, and I practically had to force him to go to the hospital. When his fever hit 105, I was worried. They admitted him and he stayed for about a week. The day before he was supposed to be sent home was a Sunday, and while my workplace was closed, I had to catch up on year-end reports. It wasn't unusual for me to come in on days we were closed. My coworker Lolo would be there, which meant I could bring my daughter. Lolo was childless, though she had tried for many years before her husband passed away to conceive a baby. She was in this particular Sunday to work on the company newsletter, and as it was a rather simple project, she often asked to play with my daughter Via when I brought her in. The day started off normal as I crunched numbers and prepared my reports. Lolo and Via sat at the other side of the office, coloring. It made me happy to watch them. Lolo got so much enjoyment from being around a child, and Via loved the attention. It was a win-win. When she asked if she could take the little lady for a walk around the dealership, I said sure. What could it hurt? We were the only ones in the building, and Via loved to look at all the cars. A half hour passed. I thought it was odd that they were gone for so long, so I took a peek out of the cashier's window to see if they were in the waiting room. They weren't. But as I turned to go back to my desk, I noticed Lolo's shoes. She looked like she was lying face down still in the hallway. My heart raced as I ran out to see what happened. Via was nowhere in sight. I flipped open my phone and dialed 911 and ran down the hall to the service area to try and find my daughter. I hardly responded to the operator. I was so frantic. She said they would send someone and told me to stay put, but I couldn't. My daughter was gone. Lolo had been knocked out. Something was wrong with this picture, and by the time they got there, it could be worse. I dropped the phone when I heard a tiny scream in the distance. It was coming from the parts department, an area of the building that remains locked when business is closed. The only way in is with a key, so whoever had her was a coworker. I ran to the door and shoved it. It was locked. I saw her standing in an aisle, a tall figure behind her, and when she saw me, she tried to run to the door. He grabbed her and ran to the back of the room, out of sight. I was about to lose it when I saw the propane tank nestled behind a display to my right. I grabbed it and threw it through the glass. It shattered, and I unlocked the door and raced inside. I heard her cries from the upstairs stockroom and headed upstairs as fast as I could. As I ran, I heard the door busting downstairs. The police were here finally. I yelled to give them my location, rounded the corner to the stockroom, peering down the aisle to find her. Aisle 1, nowhere in sight. Aisle 2, nowhere in sight. What I saw in aisle 3 chilled me to the bone. The owner's son, a known garbage can style addict. He used to be a salesman, had my daughter at the end of the aisle. He was tying her up with electrical wire. She tried to run to me and fell. He tried to run back the stairs, but as he hit the middle of the steps, he was blocked off by police officers. Via was fine physically. We've been taking her to a child therapist to work through the trauma. I'm just glad she's too young for this to really form into a memory. As for the crazy man who took her, he had been living upstairs. Apparently no one took his key when he was fired 6 months previous. He never provided an explanation. The owner paid a large amount of money to keep this out of the news. As for Lolo, she recovered and never came back to work, though we remained in touch. I am pretty, I guess, evil, whatever. I creep this subreddit a lot, decide to actually get an account and post my happening. For privacy, I'm changing a few things. I'm a 20-year-old male, and I run a large haunted attraction, like a haunted house. You pay, walk through, and we scare the lights out of you. We hold a cast call auditions about 3 weeks before the haunt season starts, and we always have interesting people showing up. Obviously, only interesting people audition to scare people for 5 hours a night. I get a close connection with some of the encounters throughout the season. All haunters will tell you that it bonds people in this weird, freaky way. One kid stood out for me at last year's edition. He was so creepy naturally. He impressed me so much. I asked him if he wanted to pick the scene he got to work. We never do that. We put actors in the scenes we want them in. He picked a butcher shop. His performance was perfect. He scared the daylights out of the test group we sent through. I was so impressed. After auditions, I shook his hand and told him how impressed I was. He was excited. We talked for about 3 hours after auditions. I never forgot what he told me as he left the makeup room. I'm just glad I found a possible job that lets me act the way I want to every day, minus murder charges. We both got a good laugh out of it, and I told him I'll call him to let him know if he got the job and go over the details about the job. Exactly 4 days later, I had gotten his application out of the stack and was excited to call him. An old man answered the phone and went quiet when I asked if the boy, Steve, was home. After a pause, he asked what I wanted with him. After I explained, he told me that the boy was not available anymore. I was very disappointed because I knew this kid would be great. Fast forward to December, I was browsing the web randomly, and when signing into Yahoo, I saw a story on the front page that said, "Chilling 911 call finally released." And there was a picture of a boy that looked very much like the boy that auditioned. Reading the article, I learned that it was the boy. He had been arrested for shooting his mother and sister in the head in their home. I honestly felt a feeling I have never felt before, but I can't even explain it. Clicking the link to the 911 call, I was expecting a frantic neighbor or family member, but no, it was him. And he was so calm. For 24 minutes, he talked to the operator, telling her everything emotionless, saying things like, "I guess I've been wanting to kill, and I am pretty, I guess, evil, whatever." He is now the center of a gun law debate, and a debate on laws prosecuting minors. I can't even describe the feeling I got hearing the 911 call. All I can say is, you have to hear it yourself. I don't think it's my place to post a link or let it be known who the real kid is. If you want to know bad enough, you could easily find out. What if he worked with me? Would he still have done it? Would he have done it at the attraction? I think about this a lot more than I should, and I cannot stand that. Almost drew my weapon. First post throwaway account. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a 22-year-old male. The day I turned 21, I applied for CHL, Concealed Handgun License, and took the required class, plus several extra non-required classes, to familiarize myself with the plethora of nuances that is the use of deadly force in defense. One evening after the swings shift, a frosty but clear December evening, me and a coworker stopped by Walmart so we could get some groceries. It was right before payday, so I was broke as a joke, so I decided to hang outside and have a cigarette. I'm leaning against the passenger door enjoying the brisk air and the unusually quiet parking lot. In the distance, I see two young men exit some bushes on the edge of Walmart's parking lot. They were about my age and stature. They nonchalantly started walking in my direction, which was the first red flag. Approximately 50 feet out from me, they split up. One started walking behind the car, and the other approached me from the front. As the one gentleman approaches from the front, he says loudly, "Hey bro, let me bum a smoke." Out of my peripheral vision, I see creeper number 2 through the car window, sneaking around to the front of the car. I knew I was about to get jumped. I instantly jumped to my left, put my hand behind my back, and gripped my concealed handgun and shouted, "Back the fuck up now!" Creeper 2 comes to the passenger side with his buddy and starts walking backwards, shouting at me. Creeper 1 says, "Oh, you're packing, huh? Me too. What you gonna do?" I remain silent, ready to defend myself, as they continue walking away, heckling and screaming obscenities at me. So two punks from Wally World, let's not meet again. The Angry Glaring Cactus Man. This took place when I was 11 years old, and if it wasn't for my naiveness, I would have been pretty scared. When I was 11 years old, I was pretty small for my age, and going through a short-lived phase of wearing everything pink and Barbie print. So pretty sweet and innocent, usually daydreaming about horses. On this day, my mom and I were traveling from tram to a nearby city to do some shopping. We had a blast, and I was spoiled too much, and we stayed in the city until around 6. Now it was around December time, so the nights were coming in early and it was pretty dark by the time we got back to the tram, and very busy indeed. We got to the tram together, but couldn't find seats directly together, so my mom sat a few rows behind me, and I sat quite near the front of the tram, facing the driver's seat. My mom was keeping a close eye on me the whole time, and occasionally calling to me asking if I was okay. Shortly after the journey began, a man got on, and because the tram was full, he had to stand a little ways in front of me with a few other people. He looked like he walked out of Grease, leather jacket, tight jeans, black slick back hair, and snappy shoes. I thought he was quite cool. He was clutching a cactus, which I found amusing, so I kept glancing every now and then. That is when I realized he was glaring at me with such venom, staring into my eyes, his face suddenly contorted with utter rage, and his grip on the cactus pot sort of comically tight. I was taken aback, and looked around at my mom grinning as if to say, "Hey mom, look at the angry cactus man," and she was already dead serious, staring cold directly at the man. I turned to see at him again, and he was still glaring at me, and unaware of my mom who was standing by her seat now. Honestly, his face was so furious. He looked like I'd done something so unimaginably awful. I tried ignoring him, but 10 minutes later, he hasn't even blinked and looks fit to murder me. I am more amused by anything. Ah, silly man. He must hate Barbie. Other people are noticing him now, and the old lady I was sitting next to was holding my hand and telling me to just look at her and talk to her. I did quite happily. He continued to glare. By that point, the old woman got up to her stop, but waited for my mom to take her seat. She walked out the tram doors straight past him and glared at him, but he moved to stare at me again. My mom was muttering angrily under her breath, but I think she was scared to say anything and incite him. Half an hour mark came up, and so did the park and ride stop, which was ours. We got off the opposite side of the tram to avoid walking past him, and he watched us almost hyperventilating now. As we were about 10 feet from the tram, and the doors had closed, we heard it. He was screaming. Full-on screaming his lungs out. We didn't stick around, and we both ran to the car. I would love to know what the angry cactus man thought I had done, or why he even had a cactus. Pretty sure a man tried to kidnap me at 8 years old. Sure, this was 14 years ago, but I remember it vividly because it was so scary. Even before this, burglars and kidnappers were my biggest fear. After this happened, I was even more of a mess. It was right before Christmas, and we weren't the richest family, so my mom and I were in a thrift shop for some cheap gifts. I have always loved stuffed toys, so my mom sent me to that aisle so she could butter around the other toys without me seeing what she was looking at. It was a small store, and I was a very smart and independent little kid, so there was no reason for her to be worried about me just being over a few aisles. The whole thing is burned into my memory so strongly that I even remember what stuffed animal I was playing with. I was holding a white polar bear, deciding what I would name him when I heard a psst from the other end of the aisle. I looked up, of course, and at the end of the short aisle of teddy bears was a man. I remember him looking around quickly before stepping into the aisle and leaning down closer to me. If I saw this creep's face today, I would remember it. He had dark curly hair, a thick mustache, a black jacket, and those horrible light-washed jeans that were popular in the 90s. He asked me if I liked that bear and said that if I wanted it, I could have it. I had been warned about strangers and took it very seriously. Like I said, they were my worst fear. I started to back away from the man, and he said, and I remember it word for word, "Come with me, and you can have the bear and this." and he pulled a yellow sucker out of his pocket. It was one of those safety lollipops that had the loop sticks that banks used to give out. I hadn't seen them around in years, but they were all over when I was younger. At this point, I remember being so scared that I could not speak, so I mumbled and ran away. I found my mom in the woman's clothing, and she told me to go away because she hadn't hidden the playhouse kitchen she put in the buggy. I remember her trying to put shirts over it, and I wasn't even paying attention to that though. I remember my exact words to her was, "Someone tried to take me." It took her a minute to be convinced that I was telling the truth and not just trying to get a peek at my presence, but once she did, we contacted a store employee who called the police. The store was put on lockdown while the police searched for a guy and tried to find someone that had seen him. The police filed a report and I gave them a description, but I never did a sketch or anything since the guy hadn't really done anything illegal. Just for your information, this was in Utah at a thrift store called Desiree Industries, or DI, in December of 1999. Crime in Utah is pretty low, and it's a very family-oriented place, so that's probably why they saw it as such a big deal. I imagine that now something like this would be brushed off and not taken seriously, but maybe that's just because I watched too much Law & Order SVU. The police never got back to us, and I have always wondered if he was just kind of a weird guy and my memory is exaggerated, or if he really was a true creep and later kidnapped another child. Bad things can happen in nice places. Though my family isn't rich, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a modest house located in a rather nice neighborhood. The area is known for its hilly tree-lined streets, and a large wooded area separates it from surrounding neighborhoods. Like most kids, I had a group of friends who lived in the neighborhood, and given the generally safe environment in which we lived, we were prone to late-night walks, games of hide-and-seek, and so on. One night in December, a group of us, probably about 6 total, and all of us 12-year-old girls decided to go for a walk. We headed for our favorite spot, which was a boulevard slightly away from most of the houses, and a few blocks downhill from any houses of our own. We sat in the snow along the road and talked, paying little attention to anything else. A couple cars passed over the course of about an hour, but we thought nothing of it. Nothing, that is, until a large beat-up windowless conversion van slowly rolled past us. The 6 of us watched it skeptically, noting how out of place it seemed and joked that it was a kidnapper van. But suddenly the van sped up, whipped around, and did a U-turn headed back our way. I still remember the awful screech of the tires. We jumped to our feet and sprinted to the nearest road, a very hilly road right along the large wooded area, so that one side of the street had a few scattered houses and the other only trees. At this point, a few of the other girls were giggling, assuming that we were in no real danger and that this was just an exciting game. Regardless, we all ran as quickly as possible. To our horror, the van started to get closer, and we struggled to run on the ice-covered street. I yelled to the group that my uncle lived a few houses away and to head for his house, so we clambered up onto the frozen grass and beelined for my uncle's place, trying to get closer to the houses and farther from the road and woods. We finally closed in on my uncle's, and I remember with a nauseating feeling that he was at my parents' house that night. No worries, I figured. His backyard would be sanctuary enough alone, since no van would bother coming down his 50-foot driveway anyways. Wrong. We stood, huddled in the backyard for about 30 seconds, giggling with relief at our overactive imaginations until we heard it. The very slow rolling of tires on cement. A quick check confirmed that the van was coming down my uncle's driveway, presumably trying to be as quiet as possible. We went into panic mode in seconds flat. In true horror movie fashion, our only option was running towards a small dark road with a dead end that ran behind the houses. In hopes of running up that road and onto the street where my parents lived, We weren't alone, though. A car door slammed, and a dark figure sprinted towards us, while the van abandoned its attempt at being quiet and screeched out of my uncle's driveway and disappeared. Our group stopped for a minute, realizing the person chasing us was a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20. She was young. She was, well, a she. Nobody bad could possibly look like this. And as she was caught up, she asked us why we were running. Become instantly more trusting, and having felt silly, everyone started talking to her. I still felt strangely uneasy, though, and tried to keep us inching towards a small road that would take us to my parents. That's when I saw what nobody else saw. The van was slowly coming through the darkness, down that small road, and at least 2 large men were on foot next to it. All the while, the girl calmly talked to us, trying to take our attention from what was going on behind us. I've never felt so trapped. Seemingly nobody else seemed to notice the men and the van closing in on us. I kept talking to the woman, who was starting to act especially weird and jittery. I realized at that point that if somebody didn't do something, we might not make it home that night. So I ran screaming. My friends quickly followed, and behind them in pursuit were the woman, the 2 men, and 2 more men who jumped out of the van. I reached the nearest house and threw myself out the door, pounding and yelling. A woman in her mid-40s came to the door looking horrified, but when she saw the scene and heard my out-of-breath gasp about being chased, she ushered us inside and bolted the door. Within seconds, she was calling the cops, and the people hurried into the van and disappeared. We sat in the woman's living room as she tried, unsuccessfully, to keep us calm. I noticed that she kept glancing out the window, and my heart sank when I realized that the van had pulled into her driveway and just sitting there, lights and engines off. Thankfully, after about 5 minutes, it backed out and drove off, for good, this time. Not even 2 minutes later, the cops showed up and took statements from each of us. They said they'd gotten similar reports that week, but wouldn't tell us any more. We all told our families about the events of that night, and although we and our parents paid close attention to local news in the following months, we never heard anything more about the van. Night Rider. The Night Rider event, as I like to call it, happened almost a year ago, December 30th, 2011 to be exact. I, a 19-year-old female, was home from university for Christmas break when this all went down. My father, who works 12-hour night shifts, had gone to work, leaving my then 15-year-old sister and I alone for the night. We live in a rural area, but there happens to be a restaurant on our road where I worked part-time during high school. My sister and I decided we didn't want to cook supper, and I thought ordering takeouts from the restaurant would be a good opportunity to go visit my old coworkers. We called the restaurant, placed our order, and waited for a few minutes before going outside to start my car. This is where things started to get weird. We got into my car, started it, and began to turn the car around to exit my longer than average but close enough to the road driveway. As I was turning the car around, I noticed a gray sedan driving by slowly with its headlights off. This struck me as odd, since it was about 8 p.m. in the middle of winter, but I didn't think much of it and began to make my way up my driveway. The sedan had just passed the opening of my driveway farthest from my house when it suddenly stopped and began to drive in reverse. I was wondering what the hell was going on, and my sister just rolled her eyes at me and told me I was overreacting. The car stopped in the middle of the road between the 2 openings of our driveway and just sat there. I was really starting to freak out, and I had no idea what to do. There wasn't really anything wrong with the situation. They could just be lost or stupid or something. But I had a really bad gut feeling about the whole situation. I was straining my eyes, trying to identify the driver or read the plates, but it was too dark and it was snowing too hard. "Forget about it, you're overreacting," my sister said. "Let's just go get our food." I reluctantly agreed and began to drive up the driveway when the sedan drove in reverse again. this time coming to a stop in front of the driveway itself, blocking my exit. I didn't need any further confirmation of my fears at this point, so I drove back to my parking space and told my sister to get back into the house. I followed her, but lingered on my step and just stared at the vehicle. I was so confused. What were they doing? Why us? I stared at them, hoping I looked threatening enough for them to back off. After what seemed like hours of our human versus car staring contest, I went inside and proceeded to lock every door. My dog was freaking out, and my sister, who claimed she wasn't scared, was standing in our kitchen just shaking and staring at me. The phone rang, causing us both to jump. It was the restaurant calling to ask why we hadn't picked up our order yet. I told them what was going on and said I'd be down as soon as I could. I called my father at work, as he told me I was just overreacting, but the car was still sitting there blocking my driveway. As I peeked out from behind a curtain, I saw the car back up again, sit between our house and the neighbors, then after a few minutes drive away, no longer in reverse. I told my sister to keep our sharpest kitchen knife on her and hide out until I got back, and not to answer the door no matter what, because I had the house key on me. I went to the restaurant and came back as quickly as I could. The car never came back, but I got no sleep that night. People I've told this story to have said it was probably someone looking to steal Christmas presents, but why would they wait for us to leave right in plain sight? Last December, I went to my friend's apartment, but she wasn't home from work yet, so I just waited in the lobby. She sent me a text that she was parking, so I went to the elevator and headed up to her floor. When the doors opened, a girl was waiting. She was really pretty, had cool tattoos, piercings, but she looked really frazzled and was in a huge hurry. We made eye contact, but she didn't say anything as I passed her. I smiled, but she didn't smile back, so I looked down and noticed what looked like blood on her hands. The elevator door shut, and that's when I heard shouting. On the other end of the hall where my friend lived, an apartment door was open. My heart was racing, but I couldn't make out what the person was yelling, so I walked very slowly towards the apartment. As I approached, there was something on the ground, and there were spots of blood all around it and leading to the apartment. That's when I got really scared. I wasn't going to go into the apartment, but I wanted to know what was on the ground. I walked around the wall as quietly as I could, and instantly recognized it was a finger. A whole finger. I just stared at it. Then, to my horror, my phone started ringing. It was my friend. I ran down the hall as fast as I could to the stairs and answered. "Where the hell are you?" She hissed. "I'm coming down. I was on your floor. I'm coming down." I hung up and entered the lower floor's hallway and got on that elevator and went down to the lobby. I exited the elevator and saw the lobby was full of police and there was an ambulance outside. I could see my friend by the lobby doors, wringing her hands. An officer stopped me and asked if I live here, and I said no. I was leaving a friend's house. He asked me if I saw anything or anyone suspicious, and I told him about the girl, but mentioned nothing about investigating the crime scene. He said since I didn't live there, I needed to leave. I made my way over to my friend and told her what happened as soon as we made it to the car. We spent the next couple days at her place. We later found out that it was the girl I saw, and she allegedly bit off her boyfriend's entire finger during a fight and fled. Who does that? She looked so normal and like someone I might even hang out with. They eventually found her and she was arrested. I forgot all about this until I saw on the news that she failed to show for a court date, so now there's a warrant out for her arrest. Do not want. Creepy man in central New Jersey. So a little backstory. As a kid, I lived in central New Jersey. This particular story took place close to mid-December, and I was probably between 5 and 7. My road ended in a parking lot and circled back around the block. It was a pretty big neighborhood, and all the kids were friends and would frequently play across a several block span. The city had plowed all the snow recently, and it had refrozen, so it was hard as ice. There was one corner of my block that no one really took care of, and it was overgrown with trees and brush. This was one of my favorite places to play because it had a little tiny cave inside, a completely rounded area of branches woven into a little nice roof. The plows had pushed all the snow in, so it pretty much had an ice floor. Well, one day, I was playing with one of my childhood friends in the little cave. We were playing witches or something like that. I'd say it was probably close to 3 in the afternoon. All of a sudden, a man I'd never seen before crawled through the entrance and is standing, bent in half at that, right in front of the entrance. Now, I was a pretty social kid, but I remember all the alarms going off in my head. I lived there my whole life and knew pretty much everyone in my neighborhood. I remember he was smiling and trying to be charming. It just came off as insanely creepy. He just kept asking us questions, like where we would like to play and what grade we were in. Then he pulled 2 bouncy balls out of his pocket and handed them to us. We both cautiously accepted them, and then we made a rather blunt exit. I just said my mom was calling me, even though there was no way I could hear her from where I was. He kept saying things like, "Aw, come on, this place is cool." We just said goodbye and thank you, and then got the fuck out of there, literally pushing past him to get out. The day went on, and I almost forgot what happened, until my mom called me in for dinner, and I pulled a bouncy ball out of my pocket. She asked where I got it, and in all honesty, I forgot the seriousness of what had happened. I casually told her, and she proceeded to flip the fuck out. I was severely scolded for talking to strangers and tried to defend myself. When my dad found out, he asked everyone within a 10-block radius if they knew who this guy was. No one knew anything. It permanently ruined that little cool spot for me. Sometimes other kids would want to hang out there, and I usually just went home. I would always avoid that whole road after this. I know this isn't as creepy or as life or death as some stuff on here, but every once in a blue moon I still think back on that day. It's really creepy to think the grown man was preying on 2 little girls. I'm not sure why he would have bouncy balls if he hadn't already seen us around. We were outside for hours, and who knows how long he was watching and waiting to approach us. So, creepy man who tried to bribe me with bouncy balls, let's not meet. Christmas break, 4th grade. It was Christmas break, and I was in the 4th grade, just a skosh over 9 years old. My friend, also 9, and his brother 10, decided to go to a movie. This was in a town of less than 50,000 people in Wisconsin, which was generally known to be safe. The 3 of us thought nothing of going to a movie alone on a dark December evening. The movie finished at a little after 9 p.m., and we were waiting outside the movie theater for a ride. This was prior to the use of cell phones, so we prearranged the time with our parents. While we waited, we walked to a nearby store that had shoes on display in a shop window. I was proud that I just learned the proper pronunciation of Adidas and had to share the knowledge with my friends. "It's Adidas," I said, not Adidas. Out of nowhere, a 30-ish man appeared, grabbing my scarf and holding his face inches from mine. "It's Adidas," he said in a menacing tone. He did not release his grip on my scarf, instead pulling it tighter, so it was beginning to choke me. His face was no more than 5 inches from my face, and I recall thinking that he looked sick. Pasty skin, crooked and yellowing teeth, chapped lips, bad breath. I was generally oblivious to such things when I was 9, but I distinctly remember thinking A, he wasn't well, and B, I was now potentially in danger because I didn't know why. My friends were of little help as they slowly backed out of the immediate area until they were several feet away from us, safely watching the proceedings from a distance. Some kind of survival instinct kicked in, and it occurred to me that I would have to talk my way out of this. The man seemed agitated and angry, and I knew I would have to calm him down. He continued to tighten the grip on my scarf, but I didn't let on that I was in any kind of discomfort. I continued to calmly talk to him about what I don't remember, until at some point he decided he'd had enough and released his grip on my scarf and walked away. I don't know what the man's problem was that night. Mental illness, drugs, whatever it was. I am grateful he decided to release me rather than harming me or dragging me away from my friends to face an unknown fate. Homeless in the woods behind my home. G'day folks, Tim here. First time poster, so don't hate me too bad. Today I shall tell the tale of the time I met a coked out homeless man in my backyard forest in the middle of winter. It was around 2 years ago during December. Being a person that enjoys nature during the winter time, I wanted to get some nice pics to possibly print out and have on my computer. I just feel the world is more beautiful when there isn't animals running around all the time. Regardless, I went with my camera into the woods behind my home. Wasn't there snapping pics of beautiful trees covered in snow or encased by ice? Traveling some more, I found a few discarded cans of ravioli and thought this was very strange, as practically no one is ever in the woods, let alone around there to eat food. I went deeper, a little bit creeped out by every new discarded can of food that I know no one around left there. About 30 minutes later, trying to get some more snaps and everything, when I inhaled this awful stench. The smell was like a burning tire, but shittier. Out of a bush, a man emerged who was producing the smell. I jumped back a little bit, as I thought I was the only person in the woods at the time. The man looked at me, his hair sticking to his face, covered with snow, a greasy black color. He opened his mouth, getting ready to say something to me, and I saw his teeth. Good lord, they look like mossy rocks that have been shared around as the camp toilet. He said something to me along the lines of, "What are you doing in here, kid? This isn't a safe place for you." Baffled by this, I stepped back, semi-losing my balance as I stepped on a larger rock. The man took a step towards me, extended his arm out to me in the form of a handshake. I didn't return the offer, as I was afraid of whether or not he'd pull a knife or gun on me. At this point, I was oddly worried for my safety, so I said to this man, "Well, sir, I should be going. Good day to you." The man then pulls out a small blade and tucked it into his sleeve, thinking I didn't see it. I started to pick up the pace of my movements, going in the direction of my house. It gets fuzzy here, as what I remember was starting to run in the direction of my house, only to turn around and see the man again and again. I ended up vaulting over the wooden fence to my house and falling at my porch. I saw the man one last time in my backyard beside my pool. He holds his hand up with an item and says, "Tim, you dropped this." He was holding my camera. How did he know my name, though? I didn't put on my camera or anything like that. Fully tilted and scared now, I entered my house and locked the 2 deadbolts, and as an extra precaution, I ended up calling up one of my friends, Jeff, to swing by and see if the man was still around. He didn't enter the woods, nor did I. It's been 2 years since I've seen the man, and I don't want to see him again. Psycho Stalker. Intro. I buy a car from a customer. He ends up being a psycho stalker. Ends in sweet, sweet justice for once. So, the past 2 stories I've posted here have been about my teenage years. But this story that I'm about to share today is a little different. Mostly because it comes with some sweet, sweet justice. And because it started around last Christmas and ended about 2 months ago. Last December, the engine in my POS car started knocking and eventually gave out, as well as the transmission, seeing as it would be more expensive to fix it than it would be to buy a new car. I scrapped it for a few $100 and put the word out that I was looking to buy a car in the $2,000 to $2,500 range. I was and still do work 2 jobs, so I very quickly tired of having to bum rides to work. This fact led me to ignore a few red flags, but I'll get to that. One of my jobs is a corporate 9 to 5. The other is an upscale gentleman's club. I put the word out about needing a car to my coworkers at both places. A month went by, and I still hadn't heard anything when a waitress at the club pulled me aside. One of my customers offered me a really good deal on a car, but my parents bought me a brand new Escape, so I don't need it. He wants $1,000 for an '06 Chevy with low mileage. Do you want me to introduce you to him? It seemed like a godsend. I quickly agreed, and she led me over to the back of the bar to a booth where a tall, broad-shouldered older man sat. He looked about 60 years old, but he was still pretty huge, even sitting down. He looked like a retired army guy, with a small beer gut but lots of old man muscle. Mark, this is my name, this is Mark, she introduced us. As I sat down next to him, he didn't look at me or acknowledge me. I got the feeling he was very awkward. My coworker excused herself and left us. I quickly explained that I was looking for a new car. He finally looked at me and began explaining the deal. It was his brother's wife's car. They lived 1 state over, about 4 hours away. They initially bought the car for their daughter, brand new, but she had a baby a few years later and refused to drive it anymore because it was a 2-door and the baby's car seat didn't fit behind the seat. It had been sitting for years, but now their neighbor, who was a cop, was threatening them, saying if they didn't put insurance on it or get rid of it, they'd be ticketed. So now they were looking to unload it as quickly as possible, hence the great deal. I was beyond excited. Mark and I chatted a little longer, a bit awkwardly, and eventually exchanged numbers. Before I went back to work, the subject of art came up, and he mentioned he had always wanted to learn how to draw. I got excited because at the time, I was giving private drawing lessons to make extra money. He seems interested after I show him my portfolio on my phone, and he suggests maybe even knocking the price down a little in exchange for a few lessons. I wrap up our goodbyes and head back to work. He exits my work shortly. I'm ecstatic. At 3 a.m., I'm finally back in civilian clothes, waiting inside the front doors for my ride when Mark texts me. Can you come to my house for the drawing lessons this week? I politely tell him I don't feel comfortable with that, because he would have to pick me up, and I'm dependent on him to take me home too. He's a stranger. It just doesn't feel right. All the more reason for you to get this car. You deserve it. I agree, brushing off the second half of the sentence. He's probably just a little lonely and trying to be nice. We set a date to meet up in a public place so I can check the car out. He plans on paying his niece to make the 4-hour drive the following Tuesday, 5 days from now. I agree. She doesn't mind, because her parents are going to let her keep whatever money I pay for it, and Mark will pay for her gas there and back, plus a tip. I forget about Mark for a day or two, until the texts start. All hours of the day, the most random questions, but all pertaining to the car deal art, so I don't think into it too much. He's never been married. He claims he has Asperger's, and he only has his brother, no one else. I figure he's doing me a favor. I can answer a few harmless texts, but then I miss a few at work and he spams me, getting progressively madder with each missed text. When I finally respond, I bitch him out, saying he has no right to my time or attention. He relents, saying he thought something bad had happened to me, that's all. He wasn't getting mad, he was scared. I think back to what he said about having Asperger's, and I think maybe I'm misunderstanding his texts. I feel kinda bad. He stops for a few days, then Tuesday rolls around. I bring my mom's boyfriend with me to the parking lot. I'm meeting him, and his niece had to look at the car. It's beautiful. I love it. Mom's boyfriend says it's a great deal. I'd be stupid not to take it. I tell Mark I want it. He spent the whole interaction silent, seemingly intimidated by my mom's 5'1" boyfriend, which is hilarious. The niece drives the car back home. Because the title is in the sister-in-law's name, I have to go to her house 4 hours away to have her sign the title over to me. Mark says he had a doctor's appointment at a hospital about 30 minutes from there, so I can ride down there with him and drive myself home. I agreed to the plan. We set the date for the next Wednesday. Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., my mom drops me off to Mark's house. I assume his appointment is at 9 or 10 a.m. Since he wants to leave so early, he tells me it's at 1 p.m. I ask him, why are we leaving so early if the hospital is only like 3 or 3.5 hours away? He ignores my question, but I have my answer soon enough. This neurotic motherfucker has to stop at every rest stop, every single one. It takes us 6 hours to get to the hospital, almost making us late for his appointment. We park the car, and I tell him to ask one of the people at the front where we're supposed to be, and it's a huge hospital. I'm not talking to one of those niggers. He basically screams. He's fucking frantic, and I'm starting to see he's a little unhinged, but fuck, I'm 3 hours from home, and he's already got my $1,000. I can't back out now. I ask directions and find the elevator to the floor we need to be on, the 8th floor. Mark won't get in. He says to me the most ridiculous thing. He says he can't do elevators, they'll kill him. Randomly, a mentally handicapped man in a wheelchair next to us repeats the words, "It'll kill us." Mark yells, "See? He knows." I'm out of patience. I yank him into the elevator, and we finally arrive at his appointment just on time. I quickly fall asleep in the lobby because he would not let me sleep in the car, knowing I worked till 3 a.m. the night before. I awaken to the sound of Mark screaming at the top of his lungs at the poor clerk behind the desk in the lobby. He's calling her every name in the book: skank, whore, slut, bitch, asshole, fucking cunt, shit. She looks terrified and screams back that she's calling security. I hop up, grab him by the arm, and drag him, literally running back to the elevator. He opens his mouth to protest, but I tell him to shut the fuck up and get in the elevator. I am in no mood for this. I refuse to be stranded across state lines because he had to land himself in the slammer of God knows what reason. We exit the elevator just as a team of security guards enter it and rush past them, trying to look normal. We finally get inside and I lose my shit. What the fuck happened? I was waiting for the doctor, and I had to use the bathroom. He came to my room while I was gone, so he skipped me to go to the next patient. He wouldn't be back for an hour. What does the receptionist have to do with that? She was in on it. She could have told me he was an asshole. Just stare at him in disbelief. I fully realize I am dealing with a mentally unstable individual, but I'm locked into this deal, and I'm 30 minutes from being able to drive the fuck away, so I just shake my head and walk back to his car silently. We finally get to his brother's house. The title is signed over to me, all is good, except the port for the car charger in my new car doesn't work, and my phone is dead, and I don't know how to get home. I ask Mark if I could charge my phone in his car for a while. He says yes. I start to follow him home. It's getting really late at this point, and I'm exhausted, so I beg him to please skip a few rest stops. He skips too, then pulls into a rest area. He hops out of the car with a childish grin. You like what I did there? I skipped too. Fuck me. I check my phone, 50% good enough. I'm so done with this guy. I tell him goodbye and thanks, but I'm gonna take off now. He seems confused. I ignored it, and absolutely floor it home. Then the texts start. Zoom, zoom, little girl. Let's see if you find the secret of the wire. You won't make it far, little girl. Zoom, there she goes. I creeped the fuck out, but I ignored it. And as soon as the SOS is open, I have registration and insurance on the car. The texts start getting worse. Tell your pimp you fucked up, little girl. I have all the money. Don't ignore me. You think that car is safe? Ha! Silly little girl. You're just a whore junkie. Well, till I go to the cops. You stole that car. You owe me $2,000. I'm talking to your pimp now because you're too stupid to come up with that kind of cash. Bring it to me Monday, or I go to the cops and bust your little sex traffic ring. Variations of this all day until I block his number. I call Mark's brother just in case and tell him what's happening. He couldn't care less. He says to pay him. I said I did. He says, do I have proof? I said yes. He gave you the money. Why would your wife sign the title over without getting paid? He asks if Mark knows where I live. I say no. He says, good. I start to get texts from a new number, this time claiming to be the cops. I know it's Mark, and I threaten to get PPO if he doesn't stop. He goes ballistic, telling me he knows where I live, where my kids go to school, who my pimp is, where I get my drugs, and I know he's lying because I don't have kids, a pimp, or a drug problem. I'm also not a prostitute. I'm still scared shitless, and all I can do is block this number too. I'm always looking over my shoulder, leaving work. I sleep with a baseball bat. He attempts to get me fired from my job, but he's laughed out and banned. Months go by and I start to relax. I can still see if he texts me, even though he's blocked. It just goes to a different folder. I check it once in a while. For a few months, he sends completely normal texts, followed by psycho shit when I don't respond. I know you love me, and that's why you're doing this. Because your dad is dead, so you don't know how to love. It hurts me too. Let's buy your kids some toys. You fucking whore. Zoom zoom. Do you like to ruin men's lives? Stop listening to your meth head stepbrother. Again, I have no kids. I realize he's just trying to scare me, and legally the car is mine. He can't take it from me. I finally relax a little. Then, I happen to be awake one day when the mail lady comes. She knocks and tells me I have to sign for something. She hands me a manila envelope with the name Mark Smith as the return address, my full name on it, and the back is stamped with notify sender stamps, like 100 of them, all erratically placed. My heart stops. He knows where I fucking live. And as much as I'm dying to know what the letter says, I don't sign for it and tell her to return to the sender and explain the situation. I realize he probably just looked up my name online and probably found 5 different addresses, then sent certified mail to all of them in my name in an attempt to verify which one I lived at. Fuck 'em. Now, fast forward to 2 months ago, I'm home alone and I get a call from a number I don't know, but it's local. I picked it up. Hi, this is Officer Sanford with the City Fraud Division. Is this my name? Oh no, I say yes. I believe we have a mutual friend here. My heart sinks. I know he means Mark. Am I fucked? Oh, don't worry, girl. I'm on your side. I think this guy is off his rocker. I've been looking into this for a while, and they just don't add up to you being guilty of anything but buying a car. Fucking justice. Turns out, Mark walked into a police station to report the car stolen and report my prostitution ring. He was laughed out, so he wrote letters, lots of them, to the government, to the president, to the sheriff. So, a city fraud investigator got involved. He spoke to the sister-in-law and verified she signed the title over, verified I had registration and insurance, looked into my squeaky clean record, even looked into my schooling, and saw a very prestigious university. And he eventually spoke to Mark, face to face. And he knew Mark was fucking crazy, so he had to write a brief account of my side of the story and advised me to get a restraining order, told Mark to stay away from me, and closed the case. If Mark ever tries to fuck with me again, I've got Officer Sanford's number on speed dial.